All right. So, welcome to Healthy Mindset Miracles. I am Tanisha, and I'm so excited to bring you guys our newest cast member. She is on here to talk about her book, to talk about her website. Her name is Alexia, and she is a mental fitness, emotional health, and a book writer. So, she has written a book called Head Trash, which is Clear Your Head Trash, which is like a very amazing title for this book. And she is also one that talks about getting rid of fears, anxieties, traumas, and self doubts, as well as sabotage. So she's the author of Clear Your Head Trash: How to Create Clarity, Confidence, and Peace in Your Life Work, which teaches how to use head trash clearance. Her book, Fearless Birthing, shares how the technique can be used to overcoming pregnancy and birth fears. I am so excited to have you with us, Alexia. Thank you so much for being a part of our podcast. And your story of what you went through with your pregnancy was profound. And I know that when you went through that and came through it, that you used that to be able to help others. Let's talk a little bit about that and introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me here, Tanisha. I'm really thrilled to be here. Yeah, so it all happened for me when I was a business coach and fell pregnant. And what I didn't realize at the time was that I was suffering from tokophobia, which is the extreme fear of pregnancy and birth. But because I didn't know that was a thing, that it existed, I just thought that there was something seriously wrong with me. And so how that felt was when I saw the positive pregnancy test, I just felt this huge pit of terror in my stomach. It just felt so all-consuming, and that I did not know. I couldn't function, basically. And it took me a long time to get over the shock of that, being pregnant. I say a long time, it felt like a long time, but we were in out of hospital quite a bit in those early weeks. And then at month 7, I found out I had a miscarriage, which,
Oh, wow.
yes, that was like a gut punch, and there was a lot of loss, but the overwhelming fear I felt at that point was relief. And so when I felt relief, I was like, whoa, what is wrong with you? Why? How is it that as a woman you're feeling relief at a miscarriage? And of course,
Right.
this is tocophobia, right? But again, I didn't know that this was what was going on. And so I just thought I was a total mess. So I thought I was suffering from depression anyway. I had a lot of anxiety. I'd not long lost my mum to cancer very suddenly. So I had a lot of grief. I mean, I was really a mess emotionally. And so I just thought it was symptomatic of all of that. And I therefore decided I really need to get to the bottom of my anxiety. That felt like the easiest thing to try and tackle in that moment. And so I hired people, I got help to help me feel better. And then a year later, I got pregnant again. And while I didn't feel the enormous despair and terror this time around, there was definitely a sense of, this is a total nightmare. I'm not going to be able to get through this. The only way I'm going to be able to birth this baby is you're going to have to knock me out cold, because I cannot be awake or conscious for any of it. And of course, you can't do that. You have to kind of be, even with a C-section, you still have to kind of be there. But at least I wasn't wanting to fall into a pit in the ground and not want to continue with life, as it were. Or not that I was suicidal, but and some women who suffer from tocophobia reach such a high level of anxiety and terror that they do feel suicidal. So that is something that women do experience, but that was not my experience.
Right.
And so at the time I was like, so I looked for help. I wanted to try and get the help I could, and I came across hypnobirthing. And so I tried a lot of that, but it just didn't seem to make any difference for me whatsoever. And I was like, there's nothing for me here. There's nothing for me. The only way I'm going to be able to deal with this is if I try and figure this out myself. And so I decided I would try and find a way for me to get rid of my own fears. And I'd already trained as a coach. I trained in some therapeutic methods, some techniques. And so I felt like I knew a little to make me think like I could actually sort this out, enough to be dangerous, as it were. So, and that's what I tried to do. And I tested it one day at my first midwife appointment, when she announced in the midwife appointment that I was going to have several injections. Now, I had a massive injection phobia at the time. Every time I would see a needle, I would faint. I'd never be able to leave the doctor's surgery.
I think that's called white coat syndrome, right?
Well, the injection phobia is specifically around needles and injections, not the doctors. So yeah, I would always faint. I never would leave the surgery walking. I'd be carried out or dragged out. So when she announced in the middle of an appointment that I was going to have all these injections, the beginnings of a panic attack were kind of very, very evident.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Oh, don't worry, it's not straight away. I've got to get all the needles ready," which did not help at all.
Mm-mm.
So she made me wait outside while she got the needles ready. And while I was waiting outside, like really having a bit of a panic attack, thinking, okay, right, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to try this thing out. And I kind of pointed to it. I was like, if you're any good, this is your chance to prove yourself. And so, so I did. And then she called me back in and she said, obviously having seen the state of mind I was when she sent me into the corridor, and I wasn't there long, maybe 5 minutes, because there was only 3 needles actually, which it doesn't take that long to prepare.
Mm-hmm.
So she called me back in and went, "Oh, so you're scared of needles, are you?" And I was like, "No." I was like, "Who said that? Hang on a minute." Like that was an instant reaction, which really caught me by surprise. And so at that point, then I was then in a kind of a very weird state where I was like, "Oh, well, I didn't say, did I say? I clearly said that. Where did that come from?" And then we carry on, and she goes, "I said, but I was scared." Oh,
She
she
probably
says,
saw it.
yeah.
Did you
She said,
think
"Well,
she
what did
saw
you
it
do?"
in your face?
She said, "What did you do to get over it?" And I was like, "Oh, because that one I was still processing the fact that I'd just done something and it appeared to have worked." Yeah, so we carried on, and I put my arm on the table, and she went ahead and did all the injections, and I'm sitting there thinking, wow, I've never made it this far, like ever. I mean, ever since I was a child, I've never ever had an injection and been okay. So this was a totally new experience for me. And then that's it. I had the 3 injections, we chatted, and then I went away. I was like, oh my God. So that kind of made me think, wow, this thing does work. I'm gonna do this for all of my pregnancy fears. And so I decided to write every single one of them down. And there were a lot of them, about 30, maybe 40 even.
Wow.
And so I then tackled everything on my list using the same approach. And then that was during my 2nd trimester, I did that. And then by month 7, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna ditch that C-section plan and I'm gonna have a home birth. And so that's what I did. I decided to go for a home birth. And then I went to hypnobirthing class to help me prepare, because I was now fear-free as opposed to terrified. And so I could handle hypnobirthing and all the things that hypnobirthing can support you with. And then I had an amazing 7-hour home birth, which was incredible, pain-free,
really
and all the things I
amazing.
wanted.
That's an amazing experience.
Yeah, at the back of my mind, I was like, well, did I do anything there? Was it my thing that worked, or was it? I mean, women have great births all the time. Maybe it was just a fluke. Maybe that was just going to be my experience anyway. Maybe I didn't do anything at all in that experience. I just think I kept myself busy during my 2nd trimester, but actually maybe it had no impact. I don't know. It's hard to tell. To only really know, to test it, I needed to get pregnant again, which wasn't at the forefront of my mind at this point. So yeah, I didn't realize that, because I didn't know I had tocophobia. I didn't know at that point that you can't do anything about it either. And so I didn't realize I'd done anything of note, if you like. And so I just went back to business coaching after my baby was born and carried on. And baby number 2 came around 4 years later, and I was able to kind of get a handle on whether or not the fears that I'd cleared 4 years prior were still gone, or whether they would come back. And yeah, they'd all gone. I was really excited about being pregnant again. But this time, because I was an older mum, I had a lot of fear-based messaging coming at me from various healthcare providers because of the high level of risk they perceive women my age to have. And I wasn't old, but that's how it's presented to you. Yeah. And so I had new fears this time around, which I then proceeded to work on. And the 2nd birth I had was I really wanted to at least have the 1st birth that I had. I was like, if at least I could have that again, that'd be amazing. Because obviously there's no guarantee with birth. You don't know how it's going to go.
Exactly.
But the 2nd one was euphoric. It was the most incredible experience that I will ever have, I imagine. And my baby was born in under 3 hours, arrived still in the amniotic sac, and it was euphoric. It was just an incredible.
Your body and your mind were ready for it.
Totally aligned. There was no fear. It was just amazing. And I don't know what happened after that, but word got out. Let's put it that way. And I don't know how it got out, because I wasn't one really for, I didn't know that many mums or other women that were pregnant. So yeah, word got out, and I started getting emails from women asking me how I did it. And I didn't know these women. So I started writing, explaining a bit in an email what I'd done, how I'd unpacked my fears, and a bit of the method that I used. And they were quite long emails, because then it's not a straightforward process to kind of explain to somebody how to unpack their fears and all of that. But I just kept getting more of these emails, and it was like, and I remember one day thinking, if I get another one of these damn emails, I'm going to write a book. And then I got another one. And so that became this book here, Fearless Birthing.
Fearless Birthing.
I started writing that when my daughter was 3 weeks old. And once I started writing, that's it. Within 3 months, I had 108,000 words. And I was like, wow, that just kind of came out all on its own, like the birth. And then I thought, well, hang on a minute, there's a bit of work here, because obviously editing and all of that. So then I decided I would share some of the insights and some of the key parts of the book as part of a podcast, because I still had some of these women that wanted answers, that had emailed me, and they were pregnant. And I was like, can't wait to edit the book and publish it. And they need to know now, because time was ticking. So podcast was an easy way to disseminate the information. And so I launched the podcast like a month later or something. In fact, I launched the podcast. Once I decided it was going to be a podcast, it was between idea and launch, it was less than a week. I just decided I was going to do it, and then it came out. And that podcast just went nuts from the outset. It just kind of, I don't know if it hit a vein, it hit something, but people were clearly looking for that kind of information. And it's
went viral.
Fear-free childbirth podcast. And that's what women were searching for. That's what they wanted. And there really isn't a lot out there for women that experience high levels of fear around birth. So it really was satisfying a need. There's a lot of fear around birth because of the way that birth is portrayed in film and TV and in the media. And so, and we don't get a lot of education around birth in terms of preparing us for it. So that's what I sought to do with the podcast, was help women to prepare, but also share positive birth stories of women that had overcome fear to have positive births. And that's clearly what they wanted to hear. And that today we've hit over 1.6 million downloads with that podcast. Which is mind-blowing.
That's amazing.
And so women were like, products to help them heal themselves of their fear. The book wasn't quite ready yet, so I did online courses. I created some fear clearance MP3 tracks, and then I had doulas and midwives saying, well, we want to use this in birth. So then I came up with some professional training, and it really kind of snowballed from there, really. And then my business clients that I'd abandoned because I kind of parked all my head trash work when all this birth stuff kind of went a bit crazy. They're like, well, we need hang on a minute, we still want your help, kind of thing. So that's when I brought out the head trash book. So in both of my books, I share the method Head Trash Clearance, which is now called, which enables people to clear fears, anxieties, triggers, sabotage, all of that themselves. And that's what I used on myself in my second trimester. It's what I used it while I was in labor. So there's an emergency version that you can use in between contractions. It works very quickly. It's the emergency version that I use in the corridor to do my injection phobia. And then the more in-depth version takes more like half an hour, 45 minutes. So now it's kind of become much bigger than I ever imagined it would be. I've trained doulas and midwives and therapists. Some of my clients who came to me with tocophobia, who were therapists, so they experienced more reduction in their anxiety in their 4 weeks with me than they had in 15 years of being a therapist. So then they wanted to learn the method to be able to give that and able to use it, so they can use it with their clients. So it's really kind of become so much more, but it all arose out of that tocophobia experience. And so the tocophobia, it's the extreme fear of birth and pregnancy, and it affects, I would say, between at least 30% of women, which is staggering considering.
I would think that it would affect more than 30%.
Fear of birth is around 80% of women. But obviously you've got mild fear, moderate fear, but pathological fear, where women seek to avoid the experience of pregnancy or birth, the accepted estimate is around 14%, but I think it's much higher than that, because when they're doing the research, they're probably asking pregnant women, whereas a lot of these women won't ever get pregnant because they're too terrified. Most of my clients, I thought I'd be working with pregnant women, but most of my clients, I'd say 90% of my clients, they can't even get pregnant. They can't even have sex with their partners because they are so terrified that sex might lead to pregnancy. Some of them can't hold their relationships because they might have to have the sex conversation, which leads on to the baby conversation. So these women have, those that suffer with this are really struggling a lot, because just imagine not being able to see a pregnant woman without being triggered.
Right.
So what about seeing baby scan photos on Facebook, going to the supermarket and seeing a woman pushing a pram, being at work and having somebody on maternity leave, or somebody bringing the babies in, or being pregnant next to you at the desk? How can you live a life without bumping into a pregnant woman? You can't. And so this
Exactly.
triggers huge anxiety, depression, and these women aren't being supported because a lot of people don't, and one, they don't know that this condition exists. Doctors and therapists and healthcare providers don't really know a lot about it. They don't signpost them when they're coming to help and support. They get dismissed with their fears. Oh, it's all right. You'll get over it. It's natural to be a little bit fearful. But women have been giving birth for millennia. You'll be fine. And none of that helps, right? It doesn't validate how they're feeling, and they feel like they're a bit crazy, which is how I felt. I thought I was a lost cause. So I really want to raise awareness of tocophobia so that the women can get the support they need. And I want to train more therapists so that when they do go to therapy to get the help, the therapists can actually understand what they're going through and then support them with a technique that works. Because unfortunately, a lot of therapy doesn't work on this condition. And I seem to have developed a modality that works brilliantly and actually very fast, to the point that you can heal the phobia while you're pregnant and still have time to prepare for birth. Now, typically when I work with women, it takes around 4 to 5 weeks to help them get over it. Some need longer because they're also wrestling with anxiety and depression. But not everybody's got anxiety and depression. For some of these women, it's just this tocophobia that seems to be, they're somewhat confident, they're happy, and then they've got this weird thing that they're like, I don't understand. I've got this thing and I'm okay, but this is weird. I can't hold the baby. I don't want to go near them. So
I think I just read recently that Paris Hilton, it took her a whole month before she could even change her baby's diaper. But yeah, so Paris Hilton, it was all over the news about how she had this baby. And well, of course, we know that it was through a surrogate mother, but she was fearful of changing this baby's diaper because he was so little. And I know there's a lot of moms that are that way. When I had my second daughter, she was a lot smaller than my first daughter. So I actually had that fear of holding her because I was afraid I would break her or, drop her or something because she was so little. So I comprehend that. I quickly got over it, thankfully, but there are so many mothers that feel the same way. And I'm certain that you can relate to that.
Yeah, when I was pregnant, I didn't want to, even before I was pregnant, for a long time, I wasn't interested in holding any babies. I remember when somebody came into work once when I was in my mid-20s, and they had twins, and they came into work and everyone's like cooing over the babies. And so I'm standing around just being polite, really, because I really wasn't interested. And then one of them was sick on her shoulder. So she was standing next to me. So she just passed one of the babies to me so she could deal with it. And I was just like, if you've seen Mr. and Mrs. Smith, when Angelina Jolie gets handed a baby and she just looks at it, this is some weird kind of like, and I was like, and then just like, no, I can't hold this. And I just passed it on. And then I had to go running to the toilet because I just burst into tears.
Oh,
And at the time I was like, what is wrong with you, Lex? Like, this is ridiculous. Like, what was that? And I had no idea what that was. But now I know that was my tocophobia.
Yeah.
I just wasn't comfortable with babies. And then when I was pregnant in my first trimester, when I was still wrestling with how I was going to deal with it, and my sister-in-law was like 6 months ahead of me on her pregnancy, and she's sort of sitting there rubbing her belly, baby's moving, and I'm thinking, like, I cannot look at that, because just seeing a baby move in a tummy was just repulsive to me. It just reminded me of, like, when you think of Aliens or X-Files episodes and there's like movement under the skin, it's like, oh, I can't even think about that. It was horrid. And this is very, very common for a lot of women with tocophobia. That, a lot of women will use words like, it's like a parasite feeding off the host. They'll refer to it as a nit. They'll dehumanize the baby because it just feels so threatening to them to have something that's moving and alive inside of them that they don't have control over. Right. So yeah, it's a very unpleasant condition to have to go through and deal with. But thankfully, we can sort it out now. And so that's what I want to make sure that women can access that kind of support. So if you're a therapist, a perinatal therapist, listen to this and you want to train and learn more about it, then please do get in touch, because I've got women all over the world that are like, oh, I haven't got anybody near me that can do this. And, and I'm like, I'm trying to get more people to do this. And I'm not a therapist. I don't want to be a therapist. I just want to get this technique into the hands of therapists so that women can be supported in this all over the world. And the
Yeah.
thing is, it's not just women that have it, guys have it too. I remember hiring a videographer when I first started my business around the birth stuff. And so I hired him. He's like a 22-year-old kid at college kind of thing. And after I've just been talking like half an hour to the camera, and he's like, "We've got to stop. I'm going to be sick. I'm going to faint. I can't listen to
Oh
you."
no.
And it's like, yeah, guys have this stuff too. They just don't have to confront that, right? Because they don't get pregnant. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think it is just a female thing. And it won't be, because the root trauma at the root of tocophobia for many women is their own birth. So obviously
Mhm.
we've all been born. So there's no reason why this is just a female condition. It's just
Mhm.
women are the only ones that have to deal with it, because guys never. You do get dads in the birth space that can't handle being in the birth space. So, but they don't have to go through the experience that we do as women. So they get a free pass in that sense.
Did you have a traumatizing birth when you were born? Do you remember? Did your mom ever talk about your traumatizing or
I
a
don't remember my birth. I've never heard
No?
stories about my birth. But it was because it was a trauma, and I cleared that trauma. I had a
And
hunch that I had a
how did you find that out?
I didn't. I had a hunch. My intuition said, "I think you've got a trauma in your."
Ah.
Cleared it. I was crying for about 45 minutes, and it was really mind blowing, that experience, just crying over something that I was like, I don't remember this. What's going on?
Yeah.
And then once I healed that, after that, I was like, oh, wow, I feel so much lighter. Oh my God, I can see the end now. Like up until
Yeah.
that point, my tocophobia felt like I was lost in the forest and it was dark and I didn't know which way to go. And the minute I'd healed that phobia, I was like, oh, I can see light here. I just
Mhm.
need to keep going in this direction and it will be okay. And it felt like I like hit a real turning point, and the turning
Mhm.
point was healing my phobia, my trauma. But I would say that I would think most women have got that as going to be their root trauma, but not always. It could be some of the clients I've been working with, it's been their puberty experience has been traumatic. And again, we wouldn't really think, oh, was your puberty experience traumatic? I wouldn't have said that my puberty experience was traumatic, but when my daughter's going through puberty, and she recently asked me, I say recently, maybe about 6 months ago, which put me on to the idea of traumatic puberty experiences. And she said, "Oh, how old were you when you had your first period, Mum?" And I was like, "Oh, no, that's a great question. I have no idea." And I still have no idea. I could have been 11, I could have been 16. It's a big blank. And I was like,
Yeah, because I
"Oh my
remember
God."
mine very vividly, the day when it happened, where I was, how old I was. I was 13, which is kinda late for somewhere between the ages of 9. My sister was 9 when she started hers, but I was 13.
Yeah, I've got no idea. And of course, now with work on trauma, I do is like, okay, I've probably blanked that out for a reason.
Yeah,
Um,
probably.
so maybe there's that going on too. And then I've now worked with women where we've hit upon the puberty trauma, and that's been part of their tocophobia too. So that is a thing that I'm now finding a lot in my work. So these
How old
go
oh,
on.
I was gonna ask, how old are your children now?
So my eldest is 13 and my youngest is 9.
Mm, that's
So yeah,
awesome.
I've been helping women with tocophobia now for 9 years.
That's fantastic. So, when you had your second pregnancy, what was that experience like when you first found out you were pregnant again? The first one
Yeah.
terminated, you get pregnant. How much time space was it from the first time you were first pregnant to the second time you were pregnant? What was the time frame? And then what did you feel like when you found out?
Do you mean from the miscarriage to the first full pregnancy, that one?
Yes.
That was a
Mhm.
year, exactly a year, pretty much to the day.
Okay.
Yeah, so I spent a year in the interim doing quite a bit of healing work to really address some of my anxiety. And then when I found out that time, I was happy that I was pregnant, but terrified that I was pregnant. So it was a very mixed experience, whereas the first time was pure terror and shock
Mhm.
and yeah, not even yeah, it was all negative and horrid, whereas the second time was yeah, I was like, "Okay, this is great, but this is also really bad."
Mhm.
Like, take a deep breath, gotta find a way through this, as opposed to the first time, it's like, "I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this." Like, the first time, it was just, "I can't do this. Get me out of here."
R
And obviously,
Right.
nature got me out of there. So, yeah.
When you started feeling your baby moving for the first time, what were your thoughts?
Well, I'd done a lot of my fear clearance at that point. So I was okay. Yeah, because that would have been happening sort of late into my second trimester. And by that point, I was starting to feel much, much stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that. Whereas at the beginning, and that's the crazy thing, is a couple of months before, I would have been like revolted at that experience, repulsed by it, triggered by it. Whereas when it happened, I was starting to feel a connection to the baby. So I was really feeling much more positive about being pregnant. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a pregnancy of two opposites. Let's put it that way. By the time I got the end, I was really thrilled. I was excited for the birth at the end. I couldn't wait. And when my waters broke, I was like, oh my God, it's today. I'm going to meet her. It's today. Yes. Yeah, I was really going in like really excited about, oh, this is the day. Great. Yeah. Whereas I can imagine that if I'd still been in fear, it would have been, oh my God, there would have been a dread coming over again. Whereas I was actually welcoming that experience with open arms at that point. So I'm so grateful that I was able to do that healing work while I was pregnant, to be able to be in that position, so I could really appreciate and love and have two incredible birth experiences, because obviously some women don't have that experience. And every time they have their birthday, I'm filled with joy because I'm reminded of my own experiences of their arrival. And that is just precious.
You're reminded of your victories, and that's
Yeah,
fantastic. That is
totally.
so awesome. So when
Yeah.
that's such an amazing way to cherish your children on their birthdays, is just being excited about the victories you were able to overcome to bring them into this
Yeah.
world. When you
Yeah.
held your baby for the first time, what were you feeling then? You just had this victory, you had this baby, you overcame something, you were excited of overcoming those fears, and now you've got this little baby in your hands. What were your
Yeah. It is just incredible. If you can conquer your fears like that during your pregnancy, and then, I managed to have them both at home, and to be able to kind of achieve that as well, not have it change tack and be taken into hospital, or for it to end in a C-section, whatever. Actually get the birth that I wanted, as well as being able to be in this positive state throughout, was just, I mean, that's got to be one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. And I achieved it. And after that, it's like, I can do anything, like anything. This is an experience that really tried me to the depths of my being. And I did it. I came out and I've done it. And what's great is I'm helping other women to have experiences like that too. That there's one lady, there are people that are doing this kind of work using my book, buying my meditation tracks, my fear clearance tracks, or using my online materials. There's lots of women I'm supporting that I don't know about, because they're just buying stuff that I've created. And then they send me emails to tell me about their stories. And I love getting those emails, because I wouldn't know about them otherwise. And so I got a message on Facebook just last week from somebody going, oh, you might remember me. Well, you helped me 6 or 7 years ago, and I've just had another baby. And I just reminded me of everything that we did, that you helped me with before. And now, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be a mother now with 2 kids. And I get emails like that all the time. There's one lady who, she had really bad tocophobia, and was able to, she used my method, my head trash clearance method, to get rid of her fears. And she had 2 babies of her own. And then when, I don't know, a year after she had her second baby, her second birth was so amazing. She loved it so much. She loved her pregnancy, loved her birth so much. And she said to her husband, she goes, I really want to do that again, but I don't know if I want to take the baby home, because 2's enough. I want to be a surrogate. And so she's now gone on to be a surrogate, and she's on surrogate baby number 2.
Fabulous.
Isn't that insane?
That is amazing, actually. And to think, like, because you were able to overcome your fears and become victorious over them, look at the lives that you're changing.
Yeah.
It's
No, it's
so
precious.
amazing.
Yeah, because a lot of women have got a lot of fear over this, and some of them need hand-holding and one-to-one support because it's difficult for them. But some of them, they just need to be shown what to do, and they can just crack on and do that work themselves. And so if that's what they want to do, yeah, I think it should be within all our capacity to be able to heal ourselves.
Right.
It's not something that should be in the hands of professionals only. We have all this innate ability to heal. And so it's just about activating that. It's about just knowing what to do. And so I'm very clear in my work that I want to empower people to be able to own their mental health and their emotional well-being journey themselves. And if sometimes they just want to know what to do, they just want to be pointed in the right direction, and great. And that's what my books do. And all the products and all the things I have for my websites is to help people to self-heal. And if they want that one-to-one support to do the tricky, the difficult, the heavy lifting, if you like, then yeah, they can get support. But essentially, there's a lot of that you can do yourself. I've created a membership site called the Clearance Club, where I've created loads of resources in there for people to self-heal on lots of different aspects of life. And there's one lady that she got in touch with me, and she said she had really bad tocophobia. She really wanted to work with me, but she just couldn't afford it. She said, I've got really bad depression. I can't leave the house. I can't even get out of bed most days. And I've just got no money. And me and my partner, we really want a baby. And I was like, well, try my membership. And it was in beta at that point. And so it's $29 a month, right? So it's affordable for most people that need help, definitely a lot cheaper than therapists. And then 2 months later, she cancelled. And I thought, oh, maybe my membership's not that great. And I said, oh, I'd love some feedback. How did you get on? And she went, oh my God, you have saved me. My depression's gone. My tocophobia's gone. We're now trying for a baby. And I was like, wow.
Oh.
I didn't, even though I'd created it for people to be able to do that, having tocophobia and depression, that's pretty meaty stuff to have to wrestle with on your own. And I was like, how on earth did you do that? She goes, I just did one clearance a day. And 2 months later, I'm free of it all. I was like, wow. Yeah, you can self-heal from depression if you want. And yeah, so obviously some people need support, they need help, they need somebody to kick their butt or whatever it is, because it's not always easy to do this kind of work. But some people are okay to get on with it on their own. And so those are the people that I want to help.
So tell me a story of somebody that you've helped that could use your techniques for something other than pregnancy. So
I've done a lot of work with business owners. So because my background is business and marketing, before I became a coach, I was 15 years in working for global brands as a brand and product marketer. And so I was a business coach when I first fell pregnant, working with business owners. And I think it was during the pandemic, actually, I had some friends on Facebook. They were like, oh, that fear clearance stuff you do with birth, does it work on business fears? And I was like, yep, it does, because I've been using it on my own business fears. They went, oh, can we work together? And so I started working a lot with business owners. And so I took everything I learned from applying head trash clearance to birth and pregnancy, because when you start incorporating wound healing, trauma healing into business fears, the results are quite incredible, as I discovered, because not a lot of people will support business owners by healing their traumas that are tied into their business. And so I was able to kind of see the wounds and the traumas that were contributing to what I call business head trash, and understanding what the fears and the conflicts are that were contributing to the reasons why their businesses weren't growing, why they weren't able to be the CEO of their business required them to be. And so I started working with a lot of business owners, and the revenue jumps that people were experiencing, or the visibility, the things that were dropping in their lap, suddenly they're getting a piece in Forbes, suddenly their revenue was just jumping, because they weren't discounting, they weren't bringing their people pleaser into their business, they were asking for the sale, they were putting their prices up, they were charging what they should be charging rather than keeping their prices low because they felt more confident. It really transformed their business. And so, so I've gone back to doing a lot of work around business, because that's my heartland, that's what I know, it's my background, I know it really well. And also I've had a lot of clients over the years who have they do sport. And so there's one lady who, she does rock climbing, and she decided to do some clearances around. She was preparing for a rock climbing competition, and she was able to get further in the finals than she'd ever done in any other competition that she'd done.
Oh, wow.
Because she's able to just completely still the mind and ignore the fact there was a crowd behind her cheering and calling her name, and just stay really focused on what she was doing. And she got further than she'd ever got. So, I know that this technique can be applied to pretty much any kind of situation, because we have fears and anxieties and stresses and triggers and traumas that show up in all aspects of our lives, in parenting, in sport, in business. They're everywhere. And if you've got a fear of losing control, that's not just showing up in pregnancy, that's also as a manager at work. You don't delegate, you're micromanaging. That's the same pattern, just showing up in a different place. You don't want to lose control of your kids because they're making a mess everywhere, and you want to kind of control this pattern. It's the same pattern, it just shows up in different parts of your life. When you heal that one pattern, the ripple effect in the whole of your life is quite incredible. So I'm doing a lot of work taking this technique to different parts of people's lives, because I'm intrigued and curious as to what else it can help people to achieve. So even though birth and pregnancy was a huge part of my formative experience of this technique enabled me to test the technique. It is really to its max. There's nothing more brutal, in my opinion, than birth. It can be so beautiful, but it can also be so trying and difficult.
And traumatizing.
And traumatizing. You know, and I don't think there's any other experience that, when you think about women that want to be mums, they've all got to go through that experience, and they don't know whether it's going to be traumatizing. They don't know what that experience is going to be like. So to be able to prepare women to be able to handle that experience and to come out smiling and have a positive experience is phenomenal. But to be able to imagine taking that kind of capacity to be resilient and confident in all aspects of your life, then imagine what else we can achieve is to help women to prepare for birth in that way. They take that in other parts of their lives. I've had women that have been, their baby's 2 weeks old, and I'm sort of having sessions with them post-birth as sort of for the support as part of that they've signed up for. And she's like, you know, I think I'm going to do, one of them, she's Katie, she's like, I think I'm going to quit my job and start a business. I was like, hold there, like, what are you doing? I know that I can do it. Like, I've got these ideas, and I know I'm going to do it. It's going to work really well. And it's like, hang on a minute, she's 2 weeks old, your baby. Give yourself a bit of time. It can be difficult and hard work. Like, give yourself the time you need to be a mum right now. It's that like confidence to just like go, but I can do it. I can do anything. Like, to be able to help women in that way. You know, the mothers that kids need today when the world is so crazy. That is a brilliant thing. But taking that into other parts of life as well, into sport, into business, also really excites me. So who knows what the future holds at this stage.
There's a lot of aspects about birthing that can go wrong, or challenges that can happen, and the techniques that you use helps those to prepare for that. For mine, for instance, I've had 3 babies. My first one, she was a week overdue. So she was 41 weeks when I went in, and we went in and the doctors started to induce me. I think I went at 9 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And I went through labor for 13 hours with her. But during those 13 hours, there was a couple of times when as they were putting the Pitocin in me, her heart rate would drop a couple times. And the nurse would run in there, they'd throw me on my knees, they'd push on my stomach and they'd try to get her heart rate back up. And they were really good at explaining what was going on. And I was in such a state of a mind where I wasn't shocked or scared or anything. I just wanted to see, like, what is happening before. I didn't react is what I did. I just did not react to anything. Got her heart rate back running. This happened about 3 times. And then the third time they came in and said, we're going to have to do an emergency C-section. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We're going to have to take her. And I said, okay, let's go do that. And so they took me in the emergency room and prepped me for C-section. They took her out. My mom was in the room with me because her dad had passed out in the hallway. I don't know what happened to him. He ended up passing out. So my mom went in with me, and I asked my mom, because I knew she was out, but I didn't hear her cry. And I said to my mom, Mom, why is she not crying? And my mom started to cry, and she says, well, baby, sometimes babies don't cry when they come out. They have to suction the mucus out. She's like explaining all this. What she did not tell me was that her cord was wrapped around her throat 3 times. And when they had pulled her out, she was not breathing. She was purple. And so they had to revive her is what they had to do. And what they were doing at the time, I'm asking my mom, why is she not crying? And but it took about 5 minutes for them to get her to breathe and to cry. And when I first heard her cry is when I cried. That was the first time in those 13 hours after all that trauma that I went through with her that I actually cried. And they told me, well, because she wasn't breathing for 5 minutes, there's a possibility she could have some brain damage or challenges. My daughter's now 27 years old, and she's a brilliant young lady. She has a 2-year-old of her own, and she has done extremely well through life. Never had a single issue with her because of the trauma of her birth. However, the more I talk to you, the more I realize that the trauma of her birth could be the underlying challenges of what she deals with, anxiety and things today. And she had a difficult pregnancy as well because of that. So I'm going to tell her to read your book and to
Wow.
go to your website. So I wanted you to share, because we just got a few minutes left, share with us where our listeners can find your website. What's the name of your website, where they can find your books, and where they can find you.
So for the birth stuff, you can find that at fearfreechildbirth.com. That's the podcast. And the book on the birth stuff is Fearless Birthing. There's a website for that as well, fearlessbirthing.com. And then for my head trash stuff, there's clearyourheadtrash.com. If you're a professional and want to learn how to use my methods, let's say you're a therapist or a coach or a doula or a midwife, then you can find out more about my training at headtrashclearance.com. Yeah, so otherwise come and find me on Facebook, Alexia Leachman. And I've got training, if professionals are interested in training, then I've got some training kicking off in January. So you can come and find out about that if that interests you. And of course, if you just want to do self-healing, there's lots of stuff at clearyourheadtrash.com, lots of digital products to help you self-heal inner child wounds, or there's my membership there as well. So if you want to start the healing journey, there's plenty of stuff at the Head Trash website for you to do that.
And you are in the middle of writing another book right now. What is that book about? Give us a
That's
little
about
bit of
tocophobia. So I realized that
Okay.
when I wrote my book, Fearless Birthing, because I'd healed of my tocophobia, I didn't realize that some of the stuff in there actually, women with tocophobia find it hard to read. And that is not my intention at all. So I want to write a book specifically for women with tocophobia to help them navigate that journey, so that they've got something there to help them, and also for professionals to better understand the condition, so that the healthcare providers can better support them when they're asking for the support that they need. So yeah, next book coming out probably in 2024 now is a book about tocophobia.
That is fabulous. Well, I thank you so, so much for coming on and sharing. And for those of you that are listening, all of her links and the information she was just speaking about, I am going to share with you guys, like I always do at the bottom. Definitely go see her, go like her Facebook, her Telegram, or Instagram, go find her all over social media, and go read her books, because it seems like it's more than just pregnant women that need to read this, but it
Yeah.
also seems like those of you that are in a field of helping others and want to have a little extra knowledge under your belt, this is where it's going to begin. So thank you so much, Alexia. I really love your story. Thank you for meeting with me and doing this podcast with me today. And I look forward to talking with you again.
Thank you for having me, Tanisha. It's been lovely. Thank you.
Absolutely.